All right, this is steps 15, 16, and 17. We've made a new layer called stock. I'm going to the pen tool, which is down here. I'm going to click one anchor point. I'm going to move my cursor down here. I'm going to click a second one, and I'm going to drag that out, and I'm going to draw whatever kind of curve I want, just to give a little curve to my stem. I'm going to go to the brush palette in the brush tool. So I'm going to click the brush tool. I'm going to go to brush up here in window where you can press F5. And you're going to set the control to fade to 70, fade 70, 20% for the minimum diameter. And then you're going to come up here to the brush size, set that diameter to 14 and the hardness to 100%. You're going to come down to the paths palette, click this down menu, and you're going to stroke the path, which just means you're going to lay down the brush dynamic you just created over that path. So I'm going to click that. I'm going to choose the brush tool. And then now I can click outside of anywhere here in this paths box just to get rid of that line. All right. So now I'm going to go back to my layers. We need to get rid of this little bit that's overhanging the bottom. So I'm going to command click the dent layer. I'm going to go to my rectangular marquee tool, hold down the shift key and draw that. And now we need to inverse the selection. So I'm going to select inverse. And so what I'm going to do when I press delete, it's just going to clear these bottom pixels out here. So delete, and now those are gone. And now I can deselect. And now I have a nice clean edge on the bottom of that stem to where the dent would overlap it. All right, so now we're moving on to step 16. I've made a new layer at the top called Stock Highlight. I'm going to go to the brush tool again. I'm going to set the master diameter to 5. And I'm going to set my foreground color to white. And I'm going to go to the paths palette again. I'm going to turn this back on so I can see that's the same path I used before. I'm going to stroke path again, and this time it'll be a smaller white faded brush stroke over that. There we go. And then I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. I'm going to go back to my layers. I'm going to command click the stock layer to get those marching ants up. I'm going to go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and with a radius of 1 for a very small little blur for a very small space. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to set the layer opacity to 40. I'm going to select the stock layer in the layers palette, and I'm going to add some noise here. So filter, noise, add 3% with a uniform distribution, and make sure monochrome is checked. All right, I'm going to hit OK. And then I can go ahead and press Command D to deselect that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just burn this at the bottom, just so that it's a little bit darker at the bottom of the stem. So I'm going to go to the burn tool, which is this one. Make it a little bit smaller. And I'm going to set the hardness to 0. And I'm just going to, it should be at midtones. And I'm going to just go ahead and burn the bottom of that. And then for step 17, I'm going to make a new layer below the stock layer. And call it stock shadow. I'm going to move that below the stock layer. And I'm going to grab the rectangular marquee tool and make a selection just like the picture. So I'll show you what that looks like. So I'm going to make a skinny little rectangle here. Move it over just a little bit. I'm going to fill this with black. So I'm going to go to my fill bucket. I'm going to switch this to black, fill this in here, and then go to Edit Transform Perspective. And I'm just going to pull those corners out the top just to give it a little bit of a tweaked little angle here. And set return to set that. Then I'm going to deselect that. I missed that. Go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And I'm going to set the radius to 7. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to erase this top part of the shadow because there's no business for it to be up that high. So I'm going to go to my eraser tool. It's a little bit smaller. I want my hardness to be low, so that's low, so that's good. I'm just going to erase it off the top a little bit. I just don't want to go beyond the edge of the apple. And then I'm going to command click that indent layer. We're going to do the same thing we just did in the last step where we clean up that thing, the bottom edge there. Command click the dent. Then I'm going to draw with my rectangular marquee tool around the top. I'm going to go to select inverse and press delete. And then I'm going to deselect that. And I'm going to set that layer opacity to 60%. Make it a little softer. Okay. That's the end of this one.